Hey guys, it's Attila here with Justin from SOS. We're at the Watchtower here in Honolulu, and we're having an emergency tech session today. We want to talk about Hurricane Lane. Everyone knows about it. It's coming, and it's a Category 4 hurricane. It could hit Oahu, and we rely on our local media sources to keep us informed. And one of the biggest ones out here in Hawaii is Hawaii News Now. This is a live session, so we're going to jump onto Hawaii News Now's website, and we're going to take a look to see what it looks like. But either ways, this is also an interactive session. So the whole point is that we want to interact with you because this is a live cast. On one of these sides of the screen here, you're going to see the ability to ask questions during our presentation. So feel free to just jump on in, ask us questions. We're going to be able to interact with you live. And that's the whole point of our presentation here. Let's talk a little bit about why we're here, though, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and if we don't answer your question right away, just give us a few minutes. We'll try and get to it. This is our one of our first live streams, so we have a few technical glitches and stuff we're going to be working out as we go. But
we're technical people, so we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. All right, so let's check the next slide here. So. All right, so the idea is that you're probably wondering like who we are a little bit. So let's kind of talk about that for a second. So our whole point is that we want to protect and optimize the technology that businesses use, and we want to keep them growing. We want to keep them protected. We want to keep them we're protection people. We're protectors. So when this hurricane issue came up, we really wanted to do something that would give back to the community, and all we're asking is that you just kind of give us a chance, see if you got one good idea that you can take away from this, because at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff more is common sense, but when everyone's in a panic, it's kind of hard to remember some common sense stuff, and that's what we're here for. So yes, I see questions coming in. We'll answer them here in a second. So anyways, give us a chance to remind you, give you that one good takeaway. So next slide. Now over here, we really want to offer guidance on a few items here. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about managing these power interruptions and surges that are bound to happen, managing these internet and phone interruptions, bound to happen, staff shortages. What's that mean? People not being able to come in, or hopefully not swept down to the ocean. But let's just say can't come in. Chain of command issues. These are all things that are required for regulatory compliance, and something that you want to think about before something happens that allows your business to kind of grind to a halt. So, and then of course we're going to talk a little bit about tech and the cloud and how to continue operating when your facilities are damaged or unavailable, and what you can do about that. Let's go to the next slide. So, what we know about Hurricane Lane. So, what we know as of right now. It's a Category 4 hurricane. What that means is that we have 150 plus mile per hour winds coming our way, and it is going to hit our Hawaiian Islands. In fact, if you go to the DOE, which is the Department of Education's website, you'll see that a lot of the schools have had all their after-school activities closed, pending school closures. Nothing's going on until next week, so they are bracing for impact. Now, there's a good chance that critical infrastructure is going to likely be affected. That's whether the hurricane hits us or not. Even some mildly rough winds can take down power, and it can disrupt a lot of the infrastructure that we have and a lot of the things that we depend upon. So this is, of course, going to trickle down to your business technology problems, and this is where SOS can really come in and help you out. We can give you some preventative things and ideas that you can do to keep yourself prepared, get yourself prepared. So let's go to the next slide here. So let's talk first about managing these kind of power interruptions that we're definitely going to be seeing. So who here knows what a UPS is? Justin knows.
Yeah.
It's a battery backup, right? So those battery backups, you see them at Costco, they're like $100. Bet your big batteries are really heavy. And whenever there's some sort of power outage or blip in the power grid, they make this loud beeping sound and it drives everyone crazy, right? Now you know what I'm talking about. Those are battery backups. They're great, but they don't last forever. So even a real nice big beefy one is likely going to keep the system up, 40 to 60 minutes tops?
Yeah, generally, the ones most users are going to have, they pick up from Costco or Sam's Club, it's going to last them about 20 to 40 minutes on average.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's usually intended to give you enough time to save what you're working on and shut down the computer properly. So, it helps prevent harm to the computer.
But in the same vein, when you have these kind of problems, uh, your battery pack isn't always going to protect you.
It's
It
true.
it could it could get fried during the process. And in fact, these battery packs, especially the ones by the name brands like APC, they will provide you like a guarantee, like a warranty that if your computer is damaged while it's plugged into this battery pack, they'll pay you up to what 10 grand or 50 grand. I don't know what it is. Anyways,
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. You have the battery pack there, the computer's plugged into the battery pack, poof goes the computer when the power comes back on. So I wouldn't exactly depend 100% on it, but it's better than nothing. You have a little bit of a shield between what goes on. Now, the key thing is that there's not just power outages. There's all kinds of other things that happen in between. So there's these things called brownouts, which I'm sure you've seen before. Maybe you're sitting there at your desk or you're in your home, and all of a sudden all the lights dim. Your refrigerator starts to get a little quiet, and then your computer goes, kind of grinds down a little bit. That is really important because that means that the equipment that requires a certain amount of power for it to function is not getting that amount of power.
Yeah, it's usually when you're getting wild fluctuations in amplitude or voltage, and that can cause all kinds of havoc with electronics, and it's not a good thing. So you definitely want to make sure that you have that's one of the other advantages actually of a battery backup is that it can help protect your electronic devices from those abrupt interruptions in amplitude and voltage that kind of iron them out a little bit. So it's another advantage to having the battery backup is you'll be less affected by those kinds of brownouts, and so your electronics will anyway.
Now, what you're going to want to look for on your battery pack is something called AVR, automatic voltage regulation. Now, that's pretty common on the battery packs that plug into the big fancy electronics like LCD TVs or high-end televisions. So they have like that commercial grade. But I did notice the ones at Costco do have AVR on their kind of mid-grade $100, 1100 watt UPSs, which is really good. So I think that's a real good thing to have. So look for that AVR, especially if you have anything plugged into that into the critical things like your phone system, your servers. Voltage regulation means exactly what you're talking about. When there's a dip, it can at least regulate the voltage, bring it back up again correctly. It also has something called sine wave correction, and I'm not an electronics engineer, so I don't know how that all works, but there's something like the electricity works at a certain sine wave, and if it's out of whack, then all your equipment goes out of whack, and everything goes out of whack, and everything gets burned up, and then we have to put in new stuff. So we're going to look for that. So we talked about brownouts, the power on and off conditions. That's also pretty important. When the power does come back on, what's going to happen? Is it just going to come on and stay on? No, never does. If it comes on, then it goes off. Comes on, it goes off, and then finally stays on, and then like 30 minutes later it goes off again.
Yeah.
And then your neighbor gets power and you don't, and it just drives everyone nuts.
So it's usually recommended to when you have these kinds of situations where the power seems unstable is to turn off your electronics and make sure that they're actually not going to turn back on their own when the power starts to come back on, because that's when you can really run into those problems that can cause a lot of problems with your electronics. So like for example on your computer, how it has that hard switch on the back of the power supply, that it's a good idea to just go ahead and flip that off so that the computer will not turn on its own. Some computers will restore their, typically will try and restore power after power is lost, and they'll try and turn themselves back on. And if you physically cut the power to the power supply, then that won't happen, and that can help preserve your electronics when you're having unstable power issues like that.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes if you don't have a power backup, at least you have a power strip.
Yes.
You can turn that off or just unplug it straight from the wall. I know one of the things at home I would always unplug my TV.
Yeah, I mean most
goes
power
out, forget it.
most power surges that usually happen in those situations when the power is first coming back on, is when you're going to have those really dangerous power surges.
So yeah, you don't want that. I know with solar, that's also another issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you have a PV system, then I think it has some ability to regulate the amount of power that kind of comes in, but you also want to make sure you don't damage your system as the power comes back on, or it doesn't get damaged. So I know power can be kind of a complex. It sounds like a simple thing. You just turn on and off a light switch, but it's actually very complicated. So let's also talk about how power can affect your ability to exit a building. If you live in a high rise, or if you're working downtown, of course, you have elevators, you have door access and control systems, your ability to exit a garage. These are all pretty important stuff. So you want to know how to exit if you need to, right? If you need to go out and get food, this is pretty important stuff. And technically, the elevators are supposed to have a battery backup, and they're supposed to have their generators checked. But I don't know. I'm kind of a little stickler on that. Whenever I get into an elevator, I look down to see when it was last inspected, and the elevator's running a little weird. This is last time inspected was like 2005 or 20.
Yeah, well, generally in an emergency situation, you're going to want to use the stairs anyway, and I think that's the safest way to go. Is if you're at all concerned about it, just find the stairs and use those and get yourself some exercise, and you'll be better off.
Yeah, unless you live on the 30th floor like I did when I first lived in Waikiki and we had no power for a few days. Oh, yeah, that was a lot of exercise. Yeah,
sounds like a lot of fun. You'll have to tell me about that sometime.
So let's see what else we have here. So we talked about what we can do when the power goes out, and let's talk about now when the internet goes out and the phones go out. So here's a key thing. Obviously, if power goes out, let's pretend you still have the requirement of a server inside of your office, right? Well, what are you going to do? So the servers themselves should have a backup. It's not just any old backup; they're bare metal restore backup. Mm-hmm. That means that if the server itself is physically failed, and you buy a server that's different or a dissimilar piece of hardware, you can actually bring it back. And you would think that it's just like putting fuel in a gas tank. You just put fuel in one car and put fuel in a different car. It's not the same. Servers are pretty complex, and having a good backup, and especially if it's offsite, is pretty important, because if that backup is no good that you have on-site, or if it gets damaged on-site,
test your backups, people. You should always test your backups.
Test it out. Make sure, and a lot of times, IT guys are great. We all try to do our best. We're watching a lot of backups, and keeping an eye on them. And we'll look at them and we'll say, like, yeah, no problem. The backups are going through. I got a little notification that says the backup went through. But that doesn't always mean that it's actually accurate.
Yeah.
So as IT people, you definitely want to talk to your IT staff and make sure that your backups are good.
Yeah, you want to make sure your backups are being done, and you want to make sure that you test them every once in a while, just to make sure that there isn't some problem with the way they're being encrypted or stored. You could go and trust that this backup has been working fine. It looks like it's been copying for months, and then you go back and try and restore it, and the backup's corrupted and it's completely unusable. And it's a lot better to discover that when you can make a new backup that does work than after you've already lost everything in your SOL. So
yeah, in fact,
always test your backups.
Well, that's the story behind Toy Story 2. Do you know about that story?
Yeah. Toy Story 2. They actually did have to remake the entire movie at the last. I think it was like the last 6 months they had to.
Well, yeah,
do most of the animation and everything.
The actual, the head lady there, I forget the director or whatever, she had a baby. So she was secretly taking home copies of the work that the guys had been doing for the past, 2.5 years. And it wasn't like, 2 people. This was like a staff of hundreds.
Yeah.
She was taking that home with her just to, make sure that, she could review the work. So what happens, right? Some clown accidentally deletes everything. Right, all the characters, everything was deleted, and then the IT guys are like, "Oh, no problem, we have backup." So they truck in the backups, empty. Turns out they hadn't been doing backups for years. They would have lost years of work. I don't know, tens of millions of dollars is my guess. And she was like, "Well, I have it at home. I have a copy." And so sure enough, they went to her home. They brought her computer back. They put pillows all around it, and safely carried it into there, and they got all the data back. It was really something. Well, we wouldn't have the movie if it weren't for that. So, anyways, moving on. Yeah. We don't have a lot of time here. So, the key is also the last bit of backup you should probably have is, regardless of whether you have bare metal restore of your servers or your most important computers, such as like accounting and so on, make sure you have a copy of your, your programs that are critical business media that you need to actually get back up and running. So let's say all your computers get washed away. You need to go down to Costco or Best Buy and buy some more computers. You bring it back. Oh, wait a minute. Where's our copy of QuickBooks? Where's our copy of our Timberline? That kind of stuff. So you want to be able to think about what critical software programs that you do need. Make sure you have the installation media. If it's a downloadable piece of software, it's fine. Put it on a USB stick. Not a big deal. And that way, at least you have that, and you can get back up and going pretty quickly. So
Yeah, and if you're concerned about your backup situation, and you need some advice, or you need somebody to look it over and make sure everything is being done correctly, then obviously give us a call, and we can definitely help you out with that.
Sure. Now let's talk about internet and phones, because that's the one thing that's guaranteed to go out. Especially if you have internet and phones from the same provider, an outage on one is going to be an outage on the other. Spectrum is like this. They have one finger size cable about this thick going into your entire office building, and that distributes the phone and the data between that entire section. Well, what happens if that cable gets waterlogged or damaged, or let's say we have some homeless people who want to stay warm because there's this big hurricane, they burn up the wires. What are you going to do? Things happen. So
yeah, or as often happens around some of these old buildings, some rats may get into things and chew through the cables.
Yes,
it happens more often than you would think, actually.
Yes, any place where there's food, there's going to be rats. I'm sorry, guys, if you're in the restaurant business, and if you're not in the restaurant business, now you do. So the key is, when that stuff goes out, what are you going to do, right? So I'm assuming that most of you folks don't have a redundant circuit. That means you have a line from Spectrum and a line from Hawaiian Tel, and if the Spectrum line goes out, the Hawaiian Tel line is still there. Some of you may, but most of you probably don't. Now, the key thing is that, what are you going to do when this happens, right? So, are you going to do a hotspot with your phone? What if your cell phone is out of service because we have high winds and the towers aren't working correctly? So what kind of things can you do to continue to operate without perhaps internet? Can you just operate straight off of regular phones, phone lines? Can you roll it over to a different place? Now, a perfect example of this is with Costco shipping. This is a major Chinese-based shipping company, and as you can imagine, that entire boat that's on that picture there, it's probably all going to Walmart. But all those little things in there, they got hit. Their America and Latin America operations got hit with a ransomware. Took down their website, took down their email abilities, and took down their phone systems even. So the only way that they could communicate with customers was by Yahoo personal email accounts and Facebook. That was it. And it took them, I believe it was like 4 or 5 days before they could finally get back up and running.
You're in real trouble when you rely on Yahoo.
Yeah. Well, yeah, not even Gmail, but they use Yahoo, so I guess thank goodness for Alibaba. Otherwise, Yahoo wouldn't be around anymore either. So yeah. Thanks for them. So the key is, what's your backup plan when it comes to having an internet outage, having a phone outage, and we have some ideas for you. When it comes to your actual phone systems, there's a good chance that your main office line has something called a failover route. Failover route means that if the service is unavailable to your location, they can send the calls elsewhere, and you can call them up ahead of time and request this. A failover route could be your, perhaps a company cell phone or an individual cell phone that we can that can agree to pick up the phone calls. We even talked about Google Voice as being an option.
Yeah, Google Voice is an option.
Why don't you tell them what Google Voice is?
Well, Google Voice is a free voice over IP service that pretty much anybody with a Google account can set one up for themselves. And I don't even think it costs anything unless you want to use some of the more advanced features. As far as setting up a basic voicemail box, you can pretty much anybody can go and sign up for that for free and get a Google Voice number, and you can call up your VoIP provider or cell phone provider and set that up as a failover route. Mm-hmm. So that if your main device is inaccessible, then the call will be automatically routed to the failover route, which is, in this case, will be a Google Voice mailbox.
And that voicemail box, it could be an out-of-state number like in Seattle or something, but who cares? It doesn't matter, right? It goes somewhere. That way, at least someone or something is answering your lines when all service is out, mm-hmm. and you have some sort of backup plan.
Yeah, and if you're a business, you could also, have your calls routed to like an answering service, or if you're a larger company that has other branches in the mainland, you could reroute calls to another branch, of course. So there's a lot of options as far as call routing, that you can use in those situations.
Well, good. All right, so let's talk about long pair outages. Now, days to weeks, whole different set of challenges. So we have your phones forwarded off to Google Voice or a different cell phone provider. Let's assume the cell phones are up, but just a little bit of a tidbit. One of the first things that people love to do whenever there's some sort of problem is everyone from the mainland calls in and just clogs up the entire all the available channels on their on these CLEC switches. So the switching platforms that actually provide the service to your cell phone, they get completely clogged by everyone wanting to find out, hey, are you okay? Hey, are you okay? You know what, guys? Use text messaging.
Yeah, we've seen it happen every time. There's a scare over here. I think the last time was the fake ballistic missile.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody was able to make a phone call for a good 6 or 7 hours that day.
Yeah.
You know, it was just the whole network was just completely flooded with calls, and nobody could get through.
So we use something called Slack. You can use data services that are essentially the same thing as this. I mean, obviously there's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's other data reliant services that you can use for this. So use that. Use the text messaging. Don't use the phone lines unless you absolutely have to. And I think that'll be better for everyone on the island. Now, here's the key thing though. Remote workers, right? So we're seeing a lot more of this just as we become more and more cloud-based economy here. There's, we have accounting and other services that are just outsourced to outer island.
Yeah.
And those places can be out of service for much longer because they're not in the metropolitan area like we are. And they could be out of power for weeks. And well, how does that affect your chain of command? How does that affect their responsibilities? If you have someone who's doing payroll off island, who can then take over that responsibility on island? And so this is where we come into chain of command. Now, chain of command is something that is required to be documented for any company that has compliance or regulatory concerns. So if you have to be, ISO 27001, NIST DFARS, SP 800-171, we have the SOC 2 compliance. You have to be able to demonstrate that there's someone else to take over when that first person is just not available. Buses aren't running, can't come in. Remote workers, not available, right? Washed out to sea, never coming back, right? So what are you going to do? You have to have some sort of backup plan.
Yeah.
And this is where we get, into this kind of chain of command. Now, this is something you're going to have to do, but just do some what ifs. Like, what if our director of marketing doesn't come in anymore? What if our director of sales? What if our HR person doesn't come in anymore? Or cannot for a period of weeks? How do we handle this load? Do we go back to paper? Do we track it differently through email? Do we use a different system? Do we outsource this responsibility temporarily? Right? If our receptionist can't come in anymore, can we hire a mainland answering service to work for us for a couple of weeks while we work this out? There are a lot of choices here, but I recommend you ask these questions, especially of your staff.
Yeah.
And your staff is going to have the best way to do this.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. If you need qualified staff in a hurry, you can also reach out to the local staffing agencies, and they'll usually be able to help you find somebody that can help get you back on your feet and fill a position.
Hopefully in a short period of time at least. So the last bit is let's talk about now. Let's say you do have some sort of service interruptions internally to your company, right? You have some people that aren't available. Your customers are going to be affected by this. They're going to understand, obviously, but you got to communicate this. And so think about where your customers are and how you can best communicate to them. If you have mostly consumers who are your customers, then perhaps social media such as Twitter and Facebook is the best way to communicate with them, and you're probably already communicating with them already. If you're more of a professional services company, then perhaps your website is a good way to do this, and to update your email autoresponders so that, for example, somebody sends you an email, customer requesting, services, and you say, well, we're just an autoresponder replies, due to the hurricane, we're having some service interruptions. Please be patient with us. We may not get back to you right away, but your email's not lost. We haven't forgotten about you. So that plus, if you depend heavily on phones, then changing those voicemail greetings to show, your new status to let your customers know that you do care about them and that and it's important that they leave a voicemail message and get back to you. As long as you kind of convey that importance, then you're likely to experience less business interruption due to this whole problem.
Yeah, and if you have time sensitive information that needs to be communicated to customers, in real time or immediately, then things like Twitter and services like that are really great for communication. It's a good way to reach out to your customers and let them know what's going on, what the status of your business or service is, and when things will be returning back to normal.
Yeah, perfect. right, so let's see what else we have here. I think that's we've covered most of all the topics here. Um, so let's talk about tech. So we're like really good with tech. So we like the cloud a lot, and you should already be using the cloud in your business. Let's just be honest here. There's just too many advantages to not using it. So when I say the cloud, there's different functions of the cloud. So cloud computing means you can use it for different things. And much like in your computer, there's different functions of your computer. They do different things inside of them, even though it's just one big box. So cloud storage means that the actual files, like a filing cabinet, these would be services like Google Drive, OneDrive, SharePoint, Dropbox, those kind of services. You should already be using those as a file repository. And that means that it's available from mobile phones, available from your laptop. Great, cool, no problem, right? But think about who can take over the responsibilities of third-party applications. So, well, actually, no, sorry. I guess before we get into third-party applications, let's talk about, remember how we were talking about chain of command? What if the business owner is the administrator for your Dropbox account and he's detained and unable to access the systems for a period of time? What's the plan B? So think about who can take over administrative responsibilities in the event that there's a problem like this.
And there's a couple of different ways you may need to handle that situation. If the user's credentials are known, then it can be a little bit more straightforward to recover from a situation like that. So this is where it comes in handy to have well documented credentials and keeping all your employees' usernames and passwords safely stored in a secure vault. And then when I say vault, I don't mean an actual physical vault. I mean a password vault. So if you're unfamiliar with what a password vault is, I would highly recommend looking into that because it's a very convenient thing to have for your business. But in these kinds of situations, having that information readily available is going to make it a lot simpler to recover from a situation like this when somebody goes missing or is unavailable. It's kept up with some unforeseen situation like that. But if you don't have those credentials, then you're going to have to get in contact with the service provider and try and gain access to that account. And that's going to be a lot more difficult for you, a lot more time consuming if you have to do that. But it is possible. So, most companies will work with you. And if you can prove that, you're the owner of the company or that you have authority, from the owner of the company to access that account, then they'll try and get you back into that and get you access to the account that you need.
Yeah, and one of the ones that we've used in the past is LastPass. That works out pretty well.
Yeah, LastPass definitely is a really good one. That's one of the ones we like. And there's other solutions out there as well that can be more enterprise level, but the LastPass works pretty well from anyone from individuals to large companies all the way up to the enterprise level. In my opinion, I think it's a great service. And highly recommend it to anybody out there looking for a good password manager.
Yeah, and they're inexpensive. It really is. So I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what if a laptop disappears, or because things happen and equipment can kind of disappear when there's an emergency like this. What's the best way to protect that laptop?
Yeah, I think having good security in place before a situation like this happens is critical. Really, you want to have some ability to lock down the data on that device. This is really when using services like SharePoint and OneDrive are really great. Any data that's stored on SharePoint and OneDrive is not going to be accessible by someone who doesn't have the credentials once you change the password to that user's account. So say, Bob from accounting has his laptop stolen and all the files he had access to, if they were stored on his local hard drive, would be freely accessible, especially if his hard drive was not encrypted, and many people's laptops are not. So
especially the home laptops.
Yeah, especially home laptops, because if you're running Windows XP Windows 10 Home, you're not going to be able to use BitLocker and hard drive encryption services like that, out of the box. So making sure that data is stored in the cloud, and then changing the login credentials to that account when a device that is compromised is stolen is going to help protect that data and prevent it from being opened by somebody who shouldn't be seeing it.
Yeah, and the key thing is BitLocker. So BitLocker is part of Windows 10 Premium. Or not Premium. Enterprise.
Yeah, Windows 10 Professional
Pro and
Enterprise will have the ability to use BitLocker, but you also need to make sure that your laptop has what's called a TPM, or Trusted Platform Module, in it. Because if it doesn't, then you'll have to use some additional tricks to sort of get the BitLocker going. But most modern
Just pay the
Ultrabooks,
$100 and
yeah,
update
most
it.
modern professional hardware will have a TPM these days. If you have a little bit older device that's 4 or 5 years old, it might be kind of on the fence. But most modern devices made within the last 2 years should have a Trusted Platform Module in it, and you should be able to use BitLocker as long as you have the Windows 10 Pro upgrade. So if you are unsure about that, it's a good thing to ask your company's IT people to set that up for you if they haven't already. Most cases, they'll already set that up, as part of joining the system with a domain.
Well, you never know. I mean, it's just something to check.
Yeah.
Just check it. You never know. And I guess one of the best ways to get around a lot of these problems is talking about hosted applications. So there's always this kind of debate about QuickBooks Online. You get asked a lot, QuickBooks Online, I don't trust it. I've been using QuickBooks a long time. Well, we switched over to QuickBooks Online a few years ago. We used QuickBooks for many, many years before that. So very familiar with both products. I love QuickBooks Online. It's great. It works, I think, better. But it is a separate platform. And that's an example of a legacy standalone application that's made a successful migration into the cloud.
Yeah.
And it's done a good job there. And you're going to find that a lot of services that you probably depend upon may have that ability as well. Everything from time clock software to hosted apps like Sage or Timberline, these kind of more enterprise level apps. Those kind of applications can go into the cloud, and there's third-party providers out there that can do this. So I always encourage clients, especially if they have a server, is to always ask their vendors the following question: can this be hosted in a cloud environment? Can this software package, this timesheets, this time tracking, this accounting, this billing, this file management, this file search, attorneys use that a lot. Mm-hmm. This piece of software, can this go to the cloud? Can this dental software, can this x-ray software, can this all go to the cloud? Offset my responsibility of hosting and protecting this data.
The question, or the answer to that question, is almost always yes. But it's just a matter of how difficult and expensive it will be to get you from where you are now to that ideal cloud solution that you are envisioning for your business.
And usually there's some resistance to doing this because they may have invested heavily inside the software. Mm-hmm. So they may have spent $10,000 to $30,000 on this piece of software. It's only been a few years. They invested all this money in this equipment, right? And then now they're sitting here and they're like, well, wait a minute, should we now sacrifice all this for a monthly fee of between $500 and $1,000 per month in exchange for all this, outsourcing essentially of responsibilities, of security, of continuity? And the short answer is yes. And if you can pass that cost along to your customer, then do so, because it's going to make your life a lot easier. So definitely, look at that.
Yeah, and especially if it is going to save you money, even if you have invested a lot of money in a product previously, it's not necessarily a good idea to keep spending more money on that product just because you already spent a lot of money. So if it's still going to cost you a lot of money to maintain it, then those are the factors you got to consider. Is in a lot of cases it will be better off just writing that off as a loss and going with a newer platform, because it could make you so much more efficient and save you all kinds of time and money in the long run.
Yeah, this is how Las Vegas wins every single time, right? You go there, you're like, I've lost $50, but if I keep playing, I'll get that $50 back. I'll tell you this much: Las Vegas doesn't look the way it does from a bunch of winners. It comes from a lot of people losing a lot of money in that place. And that's the same human psychology that goes into this. So don't be the loser at the table. Don't be the loser. If you can, invest in taking your software applications, putting them into the cloud, and working with your vendors to do that. Believe me, we're not selling you anything on this. This is just for your own benefit. So I really encourage you to look at that. I think we just have a few more minutes, so let's talk about the VoIP soft phones. So there's some ability to, if you have some voice over IP service providers, you can use some soft phones or some other software-based solutions that you can use to control your call flow. And you can also talk about like the kind of the what if. So even if we're on the cloud, we're all internet-based, blah blah blah, but we still are stuck with a phone that's out of battery. What do we do, right? So your hosted applications have to be accessible not just from mobile devices and not easily used through your mobile devices. You don't have to depend entirely on your cell phone, and that's the key thing. I like a lot of newer technologies. So, I personally have a Surface laptop. I really like a lot. It's nice and small. It has a very long battery life, and something like this is really good for professionals out in the field. I see this a lot in construction, especially where they just need a good, strong, durable laptop that can last a long time. And the Surface, the Microsoft line does a really good job with that. So I encourage people to look at those things.
Yeah, it's definitely something you're going to pay a little bit of a premium for, but the build quality, is pretty good on these devices, and you know, they hold up very well.
Yeah, I've been very happy with it. So now let's talk about how you as a business owner or as a member of a business or part of an organization can help others in your community who may be affected by this, who may not be as prepared as you are. So let's talk about that. Just do a little bit of thought. Is there anything that you can store inside your company? Any additional supplies that would be a benefit to your community? Hey, everything from toilet paper to cans of Spam, that goes a long way. In opposite directions, but you get the idea. Do you have any additional facilities such as a large ballroom or additional space where people can evacuate to or stay if they need to? Members of your community who may need that. That would be probably fall under shelter. But what about cargo vans? Can you help deliver supplies to different parts of the island? Can you donate anything such as water, food, or anything else like that? And because all these things, if we work together as a community, we'll do the best we can to give you the advice and provide any sort of technical expertise when problems occur. But it all takes a village to make this whole island work, and that's what we're here to do today. So hopefully we've done our best to answer your questions as you posted them on the live feed, and thank you for doing that. And we also encourage you to tell your friends about what we do and maybe some of the things that you learned here today. Maybe it will benefit them and be a benefit to the others in your community.
And if you have any questions about any of the topics we discussed, whether it be backups or battery backups or any of these cloud-based solutions that we mentioned on the show, then feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right,
Stay safe out there. Aloha.